Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, December the 4th. One of the cliches of our age is the teenager focused on their cell phone to the exclusion of all else, including friends and family. In fact, much of the time, they're not even teenagers. How often does Mum's phone do double duty as a babysitter? This can't be good, and there are people trying to do something about it. Joining me today is Robin Sherk. She's a volunteer mum with Unplugged Canada, a movement helping families prevent digital harm by delaying smartphones and supporting a social media age minimum. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're glad to have you here. It's a bit of an issue, isn't it? Robin, how bad can this be? When the kids are wrapped up in their phones, they're not up to mischief anywhere else and turning over garbage cans in the back alleys. So why do we care? What's Unplugged Canada, and what is it that you are trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So broadly, Unplugged Canada, it's a movement of parents across the country that are really focused on preventing digital harm in children. We're doing that through local support and helping parents delay giving their kids a smartphone if they choose to, and also with national advocacy, asking for Canada to have a social media age minimum. And all of this is about protecting childhood and helping kids have a healthy, age-appropriate development.
Now, look, every age has its own difficult things, right? And, when I was 10 years old, I was always in a book. And so I'd get this disembodied voice coming from somewhere else in the house, get out of the book and come and peel potatoes or go make your bed or something like that, So 70 years ago, it was books. Today, it's the smartphone. Has anything really changed?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would separate smartphone from social media because there can be, there's differences there. And so if I was thinking about the kids' interaction, reading books or watching TV versus being on social media, those are just fundamentally different. We didn't know what we released, but when you look at social media now with the social comparisons and the predator outreach and the manipulation through the algorithms, it really is creating this compulsive use and these mental health harms that have become quite clear and just did not you did not see that happen when kids spent hours reading books or watching television, for instance. So we are seeing that this does feel quite different.
Do you have an example of somebody's family where things went spectacularly wrong and it was the smartphone that ultimately proved to be the problem?
Yeah, I think the hard thing is there's so many examples. It's hard to pick just one. When you think of, teenage girls in Canada today, 12% of all teenage girls show signs of addiction. It's things like withdrawal, loss of control. So I think that's what we found is.
No, let me stop you there. When you're saying they're showing signs of addiction, are you saying that they're addicted to their phones or that the phones make them addicted to something else? Drugs, whatever.
So addicted to the social media app itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about what social media is, it's designed to create this compulsive use, to maximize your engagement, as they might call it. And we see that a third of teenage girls today, 31%, spend more than 5 hours a day on social media.
So what about teenage boys? Are they part of the problem too?
So teenage boys are impacted. They're impacted slightly differently. So they do show those compulsive rates. So it's I believe it's about 1 in 5 overall for teenagers have that compulsive use. But for teenage boys, some of the harms are a bit different as well. They're more likely to be exposed to excessively violent content, for instance, and groomed into, some of those violent ideologies. So it's the harms are a little bit different between boys and girls, but they're both harmful.
So is this something that people grow out of?
One thing that we've seen is when you have harms like mental health challenges like depression or anxiety, is those can carry with you. Those can linger. Same things if you see really explicit content that's terrifying to you or disturbing, that lingers. Once you see that, you cannot unsee that. So in that way, I would say it lingers.
Yes, you can't unsee the death of Charlie Kirk, can you? And I understand that's something a lot of kids go looking for, which is, a frightening thought in its way.
Yeah.
All right, so the kids have the phones. Why does anybody give a 10-year-old a smartphone?
Yeah, I think there's smartphones, and then there's some other harmful content that can come through unfettered access to the internet. So if someone's going to give their child a phone, I understand you want to be able to message them. Maybe that you want them to be able to have a map to know where they're going. And there's certain circumstances where you might need it for medical reasons as well. And that's very understandable. We are seeing new types of phones come onto the market that don't have that unfettered access to the internet, but do let kids have access to the services they need. So for instance, Wise Phone is one example, or Pinwheel, for instance. So I think it's reasonable for kids to want to be connected to their parents or to each other, but it's this unfettered, unsupervised access to these age-inappropriate platforms in the internet is really where we're focused.
Well, of course, you're always going to have a child who has the phone for the kind of valid reasons you've just talked about. But then in any group of a dozen kids, there's probably one whose parents see things differently, and they can wander the internet at will. And you see this little cluster of children gathered around the one who's actually got the phone, and they're all looking at something that intrigues and interests all of them, and not necessarily in a good way. So is it enough to get parents to, like, how does your organization see extending this so that scenario doesn't occur?
Yeah. So we recognize this is a complex challenge that requires a lot of angles. So whether that's education in schools or just in the home, to be aware of the risks and the types of harms that can occur, whether it's parent involvement and community support, helping parents group together and say, we'd like to delay giving our child this device until they're of the right age. But that's also why we're focused on the national advocacy as well, because there's some things that just are not age appropriate for children. Just as you agree, children shouldn't be going to nightclubs or driving or gambling in casinos. There's some interactions online where the compulsive use design, the harms and the risks just warrant the same level of youth protections. And I would put social media in that category. So that's why we're advocating for that. Some of these, I'll call it national age minimums, alongside the local community involvement and education awareness.
Sorry, national internodes, did you say? What?
Oh, national advocacy. So
Okay.
we're asking for Canada to have a social media age minimum, keep up with proposals that are, like the bipartisan Senate bill in the US right now, or the suggestions for the EU to have an EU-wide minimum. So you see
What age would you set, lad? If somebody said, yep, that's the answer, you're onto a good thing, we're going to say it should be at this age. What would you recommend as the age when a child should be allowed to get onto the internet and wander wherever they will?
Yeah, so I think it's really all about developmental readiness. And what the research is showing right now is for social media specifically, girls are most vulnerable to harm around the ages of 11 to 13, whereas boys are most vulnerable between ages of 13 to 15. So that's why you're seeing countries internationally set that age at 16. And that's why we would recommend 16 as well, is to make sure you're kind of past those most vulnerable years before having these interactions.
I hate to be a naysayer, but I'm not. I wish you all the luck in the world. But do you think that it is going to fly? I mean, there are going to be some people. There's obviously an organization that you're working with, and I'm going to ask you about that organization in just a moment. But in any group of 100 parents, you know that there are going to be some who say, yep, we've got to keep the phones out of the hands of the children. And then there'll be others who, for whatever reason, and it may well be that they don't want the fight. It may be nothing more than that, but they're not going to go with you. And then you've got some who are on and some who are off. And here's a whole new source of teenage tension. What do you think? What are your chances?
I think, well, I would separate the having a phone versus a social media age minimum. For having a phone, I'd support every family and where they're at. And I recognize there's different circumstances there. So you're right. You're never going to have consensus on how families want to approach that. They should have differences. Now, for a national age minimum for social media, that actually has widespread support. Ipsos, a polling firm, actually surveyed 30 countries around the world, including Canada. And they found that the majority of people in every country they surveyed supported an age minimum, a government-enforced strong age minimum. And among parents, that support was 3 and 4, was the majority. And
you use one of the buzzwords that gets us alarmed, and that is government enforcement.
Yeah.
What do you think the government could or should do about this?
Just like how we don't let kids buy cigarettes or buy alcohol or gamble in casinos, it's the same way. It's putting the responsibility on the platform to have some sort of age assurance. And to be clear, that does not require a government ID. Like if you look at what they did in the UK when they implemented, age enforcement for going to explicit sites like pornography sites, there they found there's multiple ways you could verify someone is of age without needing a government ID. For example, using a $0 charge on a credit card or sharing an email. And if that email address has existed for so long, that digital footprint means that person is obviously of age. So there's multiple ways to do this that are very privacy preserving. And I think the onus should be on the platform. It's not on the person. And what I'd say is it was just this past summer that Canada itself launched a new national standard for age assurance technology. So we have the framework in place now in a way that we just didn't a couple of years ago. So we have, we have the guardrails, we have the design, and we've seen it rolled out in other industries and other countries to know that it can be done safely and effectively without having to, share too much information.
You were describing a technology that we have that works in other circumstances that can be made to work for verifying the age of children so that they're not on the internet. What is that? Can you describe that again, please?
Yeah, so it's called age assurance technology, and what that means is you're not checking a specific ID, but you have other ways that you can validate someone is of age. So there's multiple ways that can be done. You're seeing that being used in the UK right now for their explicit sites and the age checks there, or in Australia for joining a social media account. So they explicitly say you do not need to use a government ID in order to have your age validated. So,
so the child would be trying to log on to a site, and it would just give them a blank screen, or sorry, you're not verified, or something like that. Is that what this would look like?
Yeah, so it would block you at the account setup level. So you could see the links from the site, but you wouldn't be able to make your own profile. And making your own profile, that's the reason why that matters, is when you have your own profile, that's when predators can reach out to you. That's when you can have those social comparisons, tracking the likes, all of those things. And it also lets the algorithm really collect your data and lock into you and become more addictive because you're sharing so much information and it can trace it all back to you. So it's this idea that you should be, of an age to consent to sharing all that data and consent to understanding how you're being manipulated before you're put in that circumstance.
How exactly are children being manipulated? What are the levers that get pulled?
Yeah, so there's what I'll call content rewards and social rewards. So the manipulation on the content front that's the algorithmic feed, feeding you content to keep you engaged. And the more emotionally charged that content is, and the more kind of, attention getting that content is, the more likely you are to stay hooked. It's almost like pulling a gambling lever to see, a slot machine lever to see what pops up. So that's the emotional manipulation there, is it can put you in.
This ultimately is about selling product to children, right? This is cash.
Yeah, exactly. These are ad serve platforms. Their entire design is to sell, to sell advertisements and keep you on there longer to be able to sell more advertisements to you. So whether it's, manipulating the content to try and hook your emotions and keep you there longer, or the social rewards, looking at the number of likes or followers or comments on different types of content that you're interested in. and those notifications as well, someone telling you to come back in. All of those things are designed to catch and hook your attention. And for adults, that's fine. We have the impulse controls and the critical thinking skills developed. But for young children, they haven't developed that yet. So it's really preying on some of their vulnerabilities. And they just haven't had the developmental maturity to be able to handle these situations the way that adults can.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your organization. How long have you been around, and what kind of pickup are you getting? And then I want to take you to the petition that you're asking people to sign. So first, what about your organization?
So Unplugged Canada, it was officially formed last year, and it was formed by Jenny Perez out of Vancouver. And what it is it's a group of volunteers across the country. So we've got chapters from Nanaimo to Nova Scotia, and we're focused on preventing digital harm in kids. And that's through supporting families in our local communities. If they do choose to want to delay getting their child a smartphone, it's to help parents band together and alleviate that peer pressure to have one until they feel that their kids are of age to be able to handle that. And then the other piece is the national advocacy. And this is the piece that is asking the government to put in a social media age minimum of 16 and also have stronger use data privacy rights for under the age of 18. So once they are old enough to be on these platforms, these companies are not allowed to monetize and share and sell their data until these kids are old enough to recognize what they're giving away.
Now, you've already presented a petition to the federal government on this matter.
We have.
Is there any further possibility for people to engage by signing another one?
Absolutely. I think in terms of engaging, I would encourage folks to sign the call to action on unpluggedcanada.com and also the direct participation. Writing in a letter to your MP and saying that you would want to have these child protections put in place. We've been talking with dozens of MPs across the country, and I've been to Ottawa 3 times in the last month, back and forth for meetings. So it is gaining incredible momentum, and we're gaining cross-party, multi-party support as well. So
I noticed you got a response to your first petition from Mr. Gibault. He was, one of the Liberal ministers. He was one of the Liberal ministers. He's resigned now. But there's not a lot of common ground that we find with Mr. Guilbeault here at the Western Standard. How did you rate his response to the petition when you received it?
I always know that tabling a petition that's the start. That's not the finish of this effort. So, getting the attention of the government is important. And, moving forward with multi-party legislation to prevent harm to children and protect children, I think everyone wants to see that happen. And we certainly do as well. So, his response was a bit broader and it referenced several pieces of legislation. But I want to see action today. I don't want to wait. So that would be my response is I want to see us move yesterday. So let's see what we can do here.
Right. Well, I took a look at his response, and yours was it's a very particular concern you have, the keeping younger children off social media. He took the opportunity to explain all about Bill C-9, which they couch in terms of protecting children, so it wasn't completely off topic, but it's also a bill that is about to be used, it seems, the reports indicate that, to restrict religious freedom as well. I won't ask you to comment on that specifically, but, how confident do you really feel that Heritage Canada, which is the agency you're addressing, understands what you're talking about as opposed to using you as an excuse to talk about what they want to talk about?
Yeah, I think to answer that broadly, I have no interest in watching my kids be held hostage. I want to see legislation to prevent harm and protect my children. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to focus on elements that have multi-party support that can get passed quickly. And so that's really where I'm emphasizing, and that's where I would focus. Yes, you can talk about broader initiatives and broader efforts. And, I'm not gonna comment on that, because where I'm really focused on and where my effort is on getting a social media age minimum. And this is a targeted ask. It has multi-party support, and I see no reason to delay it.
Have you had any face-to-face discussions with government officials on this yet? Member of Parliament or somebody within Heritage Canada, perhaps?
I have. Yeah, I did. I did get to talk quickly with Globo as well. But I did talk, I have talked with 4 different ministers' offices so far. And as I mentioned, a couple dozen MPs, and I've met senators as well. So we are seeing a lot of traction and a lot of movement. And I do think we can make this happen, but we just have to show that this is what Canadians want. And we see it in the polling numbers, but emailing your MP to ask for this is really important to show that broad national support.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How many, this is the last question. We're almost out of time. I'm sorry. But how many parents have responded so far and actually signed the petition?
Yeah. So what I would say is, so the petition was only open for 30 days, and it was a paper one. That was always kind of symbolic to get this piece going. So what I would really focus on is the polling numbers. It doesn't matter what poll you look at, the vast majority of Canadians want this.
How big is vast? 70%, 80%?
80%. So 81% said they want to see a government-enforced age minimum for joining social media. And, there's different polls asked different age numbers. There was one that said 84% of Canadians agreed that kids should be 16% to join. But when you looked at, the Quebec Select Committee report, it had 90% agreement in their consultation, including 76% agreement among teenagers. So we see Canadians want this, and even teens want this. They, we're finding a lot of folks join because their peers are on it and they don't want to be excluded, but that doesn't mean they want to be fed all this other stuff and get all this content that can be quite.
That's very interesting, because I hear informally from people who have younger children that kids aren't necessarily as into it today as they were even a year ago. Anecdotally, you seem to be saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think you're seeing kids are starting to recognize the harms. We saw that when we went out collecting petition signatures for the petition we had. What surprised me the most, it was like the 18, 19, 20-year-olds were the ones that would take the pen out of her hand and just start signing, and then start sharing their short stories of what had happened to their friend, what had happened to them, what they had seen. So yes, I think kids that have been through it and have had experiences realize, maybe you shouldn't be giving that to middle school students.
Robin, we are out of time, but I must say that I really find myself in 100% sympathy with the aims of your organization. That's Unplugged Canada. If anybody wants to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I'd go to Unplugged Canada. You can contact the email there, or it's robin@unpluggedcanada.com as well.
Using your smartphone, of course.
There's a lot of good that comes from these devices. It just has to be an age.
It just has to be channeled, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm so with you. Robin Sherk, volunteer with Unplugged Canada, talking about trying to take our kids back out of the grip of the smartphone, social media revolution that's taken us over in the last decade. Robin, thank you very much for being with us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.